Hello everyone. Today we'd like to talk a little bit about teams and teamwork. Arguably one of the most important facets of this project is that you're working in a team. Being able to do that effectively is going to lead to a much better final project as well as a lot less stress on your part. We're going to talk a little bit about why teams are important. We'll talk a little bit about the life cycle of teams. And then finally, team roles and responsibilities. So why do we have teams? You're a great engineer. You know everything you need to know about electrical and computer engineering. Maybe something about mechanical, maybe something about computer science. And you have the ability to do an amazing thing. You can make a paper airplane. A team, on the other hand, can make a Boeing 777. Why can a team make a Boeing 777 and you can only make a paper airplane? Because teams are great at complex tasks. Everyone can have a little bit of specialization, which allows them to do their little piece that would take someone else a lot longer to complete. Maybe you need to solve a problem or solve a design concern. Having multiple people working on it creatively allows you to have the best possible solution. Maybe you need the team to be more efficient with resources. It's really expensive to rent a 777 hangar for one person to work on the project. But if you have 1,000 people working on the project, it makes a little more sense. Okay? So we can recognize that teams are important. Teams, though, have a process they go through. This is a traditional model called the forming, storming, norming, and performing model of teams. You'll see this everywhere. You probably have seen it in previous courses. We'll take a little bit of time, though, to talk about it with respect to your senior design course. So the important thing to realize here is that this is a process. Forming is when your group gets together for the first time. So this is happening right now for many of you. Storming will probably be your next step. In fact, I guarantee it will be your next step. It just depends upon how long your storming phase is. After that, you move into norming. When you're in norming, this is when you're actually producing work, the same amount of work as if you were each individually working alone. And then finally, performing. This is when you get into the synergy and the ability to work together to do more work as a team than each of you could do individually. Important thing to realize is that regardless of where you are, which stage you are in this process, you can go back a stage, probably not intentionally, but something could occur. So for example, you could be performing well and one of your team members leaves the team. You would immediately go back to forming. Now you might be able to move faster back to performing, but you're still going to have to go back and work through forming, storming, and norming. Or you might be norming or performing and fall back to storming. This is quite a fun presentation to do. Because someone has a disagreement, something of that nature. Let's talk a little bit about each of these stages in a moment. So for right now, there's kind of an overview of all the 4 stages and some of the characteristics that you might see. I really want to point on the relationship issues. So in the forming phase, there's going to be a lot of people testing each other, trying to understand, what do you really know? Are you going to really follow through on what you say? There's going to be a little bit of dependence, trying to figure out who's the one that's going to carry the load, accommodating. Okay, well, I would do it another way, but you want to do it this way. Let's just let it happen. When you move into storming, on the other hand, though, you're going to start to get a lot more conflict. You're going to get competition, differentiation. So the idea here being that, hey, I don't really want to do it the way you want to do it. I want to do it my way, and so I need to compete with you to prove my way's better. Or, hey, I'm doing most of the work. I'm better than the rest of you guys because of this. When you finally get into norming, though, you're going to see that the team begins to work together and for mutual benefit. And then finally in performing, everyone's going to kind of have their role in the team. They're going to know how to work together. They're not going to step on each other's toes as much, and you're going to be able to move forward much more quickly. So specifically to forming, group feelings, anxious, excited, fearful. Maybe you're already experiencing this right now. You're going to be looking around saying, who's this other person I'm working with? What's going to happen to the project? What if we don't succeed? Am I going to be able to influence what we do? I don't want to fail and not be able to affect a change in how we're going to do the project. Well, what if they don't like me? Am I going to be part of the team, or am I going to be that outsider the whole time? How are we going to work together? I don't really like to use the telephone, and everyone here likes to call each other. So you're going to have these group feelings. You're probably going to have a lot of polite communications. So not more personal, but more, we need to do this meeting at this time, things of that nature. That'll go away as you become more and more familiar with each other. You probably have some conformance where early on most people will tend to just go with the group's ideas rather than fight back against those because they're still kind of finding their place. Leadership in this role. So first thing, or this phase, excuse me. One of the important things to kind of realize here is that there is no leader in your group. You can assign one. You can say, Joe is going to be the leader for this week or for this month or for the entire project if you'd like to do that. But I like to think of leadership as something that moves based upon where you are in the process and who has the most experience maybe at the time. So these suggested tactics kind of cover, could be done by anyone at any time. So, for example, in the forming stage, clarifying tasks and goals is very important. Not one person has to be in charge of making sure everyone understands what it is they're supposed to do. If each person takes a role and takes responsibility for clarifying tasks and goals, it makes it much more smooth and fluid.
The idea here really is that you should all be taking the responsibility for leadership in the group as your personal responsibility rather than expecting one person to be the leader. You may designate one person to be the leader for specific tasks or stages, but really it's everyone's responsibility to exercise good leadership practices.
Absolutely. So once you're moved from the forming stage, you'll probably end up in storming. The goal here is to get it done with. You are going to have to go through it. There are going to be some hurt feelings, but your goal is to move through storming to norming as fast as possible. Some of the feelings your group's going to have at this phase. Why should I conform? I have great ideas. Why do I have to do what Joe says to do, or Joe and Jane? Okay, so conforming to that or fighting against that conforming, excuse me. Maybe at this phase you're feeling like they just want to do it their way and I don't want to do it that way, so I'm not going to take any responsibility for what we're going to do in this project. So you lose that personal responsibility. There might be a lot of arguing, positioning, I'm better than you, you're better than me. Maybe some criticizing, complaining, competing. A lot of people will be defensive. Okay. Obviously, a lot of really bad jujus. That's why it's important to focus on moving past storming, but to accept it as a normal step in the process. That's important. So to move past it, some ways that we can do that. Make sure that you actually have conversations about problems. Don't just ignore them. Don't just say, oh, well, Joe was late again and again and again. We're just going to ignore it because today he wasn't late. That being said, don't go out of your way to poke at someone until they get really upset. But don't ignore problems because those problems will persist much longer and they might drag you back to this storming phase later in the process. Make sure you guys talk together about what you're actually trying to do. Try to clarify each person's contributions to the project and try to talk about how well people are doing, not just all the things you wish they were doing. That positive reinforcement is going to be very important to meld your group together and be able to move forward.
One more note about this stage is as you move through the stages of the process, at each stage, one important theme is going to be the idea that you're aware of moving through this stage. And this awareness is really going to be a key in helping you to move through the stage effectively and to come together as a group in ways that are productive. And so, like the other stages, in the storming stage, really identifying what's happening is going to be key. And then also how you're feeling about it, what your expectations are. Only by first identifying that for yourself can you then, in a productive way, go on to communicate that to your group. So.
Absolutely right. Hopefully you move through storming quickly and get into norming. This is again is the point where you're doing the same amount of work as if you were each working individually. So it's a transitional stage, hopefully, to performing. So things that come here, for example, is your group might try to avoid conflict. Be careful. If you avoid talking about things that might be a little a little argumentative, you could build up problems to the point where you fall all the way back to the storming phase. So do continue to talk about things, conflict, do continue with that. You also have some more collaboration, and hopefully people begin to take ownership of tasks, both as a group and individually. Some suggestions here for leadership. Again, everyone can take on their leadership role based upon what's happening within your group. Create opportunities for collaboration. Try to pick things that you're actually successful with. Don't try to collaborate on something that you know is going to fail. Go figure. Because that's going to tighten the bond between your group members. Reward collaboration. So if you do it together, you do it with someone else, make a point of saying, hey, it's really good that Jane and Joe work together to do this. If you want to do acknowledgement of individual work to each other, do that in private, because if you say, Fred did a great job and you don't say anything about George, George might get a little, there's a word for that, but it might get a little hurt. So be aware of that and do those affirmations more in private. Finally, the pinnacle of where you're trying to get to is the performing phase. So in the performing phase, you're doing more work as a team than you could do individually as individuals. Go figure. At this point, your productivity is heightened. You support and assist each other. You've kind of worked out the kinks, and so you've balanced the tasks and the relationship concerns. You know what has to get done. Even if someone doesn't like it, you're willing to still deal with it because you know the work's got to get done, so on and so forth. So this is the best stage to get into. In this phase, leadership is more getting out of the way. So you don't really want to have an authoritative leadership. You don't want to tell people what to do because they kind of know what to do. That's the whole point of getting to this spot. And so all you're trying to do is remove roadblocks. Try to avoid, if you become aware of a roadblock, ignoring it and saying, okay, well, they'll find it later, because that's just going to disrupt the whole team. When you see a roadblock, fix it immediately. Also, publicize your team's accomplishments, not just your individual. You can do that if you want to, but that doesn't really help the team. Instead, talk about what the team has done well, especially to outside people, like your stakeholder. So kind of in summary, all of the teams go through this process. So it's normal to have fights. It's normal to have a little bit of argument, hopefully not big fights, in the storming phase or even in other phases. Okay? That is normal. I've said it several times. Each person, though, needs to be aware of where you are in the cycle. So, for example, if two of you think you're performing and one of you thinks that you're storming, odds are that person in the storming phase is not going to be useful to the team because they're busy dealing with other things. So the people in the performing stage need to realize that, hey, we're not all together in this group. So let's go back down the chain to where we are together. Let's work through any issues we have, and let's move back through norming and into performing. All right, thank you.